So we're gonna get serious now? Okay.
Here we go. Hi, everyone. Welcome.
Hey.
This is not going to be good. I'm just putting it out there from the beginning.
We are talking. So what were you saying about cookie cutter online instruction?
Well, I think that one of my challenges is that I think that, I've been trying to make this case that adults really don't know how to use or how we should be using these digital tools and spaces. I think that in our classrooms, in society, especially in the US, I can't speak for international. We'll talk to our expert about that. But there's this idea that the internet is Facebook. Okay. And there's this expectation that when you are online, you are just going to one specific place, not really paying attention to the fact that Facebook or some of these tools are just platforms or tools that were created by other people. These spaces will come and go, and we should think critically about that. And so I think we look at, Facebook, we look at Twitter right now and discourse on Twitter, and we hopefully will agree that that's not what we want. That's not what we should building youth to. But I think that there's this idea that everything will be a nice, easy, clean package. Back in the day, we would have these arguments about there's no silver bullet app to solve everything. But there's this hope or this belief or this mindset or this expectation that you're going to have like the perfect product. It's going to be super simple and easy, and it'll just work. And if it doesn't, or if anybody suggests anything to the contrary, then it's blasphemous. Thankfully, I don't see as many youth doing that. I see, many youth that will move across different spaces and tools and try different things out. It goes back to a lot of the Hamago hanging out, messing around, geeking out research, and Dana Boyd and others, where we see youth online playing and building and breaking things and willing to try new things out. But I don't really see a lot of that mindset. And we have a history of this. Like right now, we're going to talk about AI and ChatGPT and GPT-3, which is really the important thing. But this is something that we've seen again and again and again. This is something we saw 3-4 years ago with online learning and hybrid learning and the emergency remote teaching. This is something that we saw a decade ago with the influx of like blockchain and Bitcoin and distributed ledger technologies and stuff. And this is something that we see again and again and again. Granted, this GPT-3, Chat GPT, all that sort of stuff, this is big news. But once again, our reaction to it is less than desired.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What have you all been noticing for reaction? Fear?
Yeah, it kind of like one of the things I've noticed when it comes to like the particular ChatGPT, it's that the first, like the knee-jerk reaction was, oh, plagiarism. Oh, students are gonna start plagiarizing homework, right? Okay. Like, all right, can we stop for 1 second and really look at what this is supposed to do? And because I started tinkering with it, and I've been having some conversations with my spouse about it. I jokingly shared the other day that I broke ChatGPT, but but the question is, how did I break? I don't know if I broke it. I said that could have been the Wi-Fi, but one of the things I noticed is, one of the first questions, and I think that's the question that we have to start thinking as educators, is what are the prompts? And you think about the prompts, and you think about the prompts, and you move the AI into what we do in classrooms. And the question is, what prompts are we giving students that they are willing to start? They actually go for the cookie cutter answer that, because I did an experiment with ChatGPT. And I asked him a question about multimodality or something on literacy. And then I said multimodality. And then I said multimodality, but give me 5 references for the last 2 years. But one of the things I started noticing is it's still cookie cutter. It's still a very, I'm not kind of like, yeah, if you're going to use this for very baseline writing stuff, you're going to get very baseline writing stuff. But the more, once you start adding layers to the prompt, ChatGPT is not as effective. It starts faltering.
Mhm.
And if you want actually, I mean, one of the things you can do, it's kind of like, why don't you try to break it?
Mhm. Mhm.
And in breaking it, what we do is we can go back and think what it is that we're asking our students to do.
Mhm.
Because sometimes you hear the complaint that, students don't want to read, the classical thing, students don't read, students don't write, students are lazy. I'm like, I don't think students are lazy. I think students are lazy if you don't give them a reason to stop being lazy.
Mhm.
If you just give them the same, more of the same, they're going to be bored of their, they're going to be bored of their minds.
Mhm. Mhm.
And then we start blaming them, like, why? I'm not going to blame my students if I give them lazy assignments.
Mhm.
Kind of like quoting Deadpool, if I'm going to resort to lazy writing, what can I expect?
Mhm.
So the big challenge here is, and the big question is, how are we going to step up? Because this is not going to go anywhere.
Yeah.
And this is not going to go anywhere. How are we going to step up? And either we try, and I heard, I was reading something not long ago, and they mentioned calculators.
Mhm. Mhm.
And they mentioned how there was initially all the backlash about calculators, and they were banning calculators from the class. And now, like, they can embrace the fact that calculators are here to stay, because now you have it in your phones. Back in the 80s, literally, we had it in our phone. We had it in our watch. If you have one of those old Casio,
I remember that.
Yeah, I had one of those. But what are we gonna do? So I think that's the big question.
Yeah.
Peggy, what are you seeing?
Well, I'm seeing a range. I think people, what do you call it? That phrase you've used, asleep at the wheel, so that you've got people that have been asleep at the wheel, maybe not even involved in digital learning other than the emergency COVID, and then thought maybe they were back to normal. And then here comes AI, which has been, brewing for years, but now, is sort of in our faces. I listened to a podcast yesterday on Harvard Business School, of all things, like hodgepodge podcasts, and they were talking about this tool as a digital muse, and I thought that was really interesting. Like, get a response to your prompt, to your thought, to your query, and then go from there. So I kind of want to explore that. So I think that's one facet, maybe.
A couple things. One is the interesting part here, in my opinion, is the technology behind it. So this is machine learning, artificial intelligence, basically what we're talking about is you have computers that are developed so that they can learn from large sets of data. So they keep pumping a lot of information into the computer, into these machines, and then they learn and build up that background knowledge. This is the information that they use to teach the machines is stuff that's been around on the internet for a long time. I think it's only a couple decades that is in this latest model. But this is, one of the things that's interesting is that, you go back to when Google was scanning all the books and they wanted to develop that repository of like all the world's information. You could see the value of having that information easily indexable and easily searchable. So this model, ChatGPT, is really one iteration, one proof of concept of GPT-3. GPT-3 is the generative pre-trained transformer third language, and it's the third model of this. So it's the third model by this OpenAI project. One of the people behind it is Elon Musk. So go ahead and insert joke here. But the interesting thing is the GPT-3, like the access to those models. ChatGPT is one version of this. There's lots of different tools, lots of different ways to tie into that. We will have at some point GPT-4 and all, just like we've had Web 2, Web 3, all that stuff. But what's interesting to me, the ChatGPT-3, the ChatGPT stuff is less interesting to me. I agree with Raul. It's been interesting to see people that go in and like hack ChatGPT and they'll ask it to like write Python scripts for coding, or they'll ask it to solve math problems. It's really interesting seeing human beings be human beings and try to like tweak the model to see if they can do different things with it. One of the ways that I use GPT-3, one of the ways that I use this is I do online note taking. I use a tool called Obsidian. There's lots of different tools. There was Evernote. I broke clean of that. I'm going 12 years strong. And then there's Notion and other tools. There's OneNote. But one of the interesting things here is the ability to, as I'm taking notes, as I'm researching for a project or a meeting like this, one of the things I'll do is I'll take notes and I'll read, I'll listen to podcasts, listen to audiobooks. And it's relatively hard to listen to an audiobook or a podcast and sort of like take notes. There are some apps that you can sort of like click through and say, hey, take a note here, take a note here. But one of the values I've seen is I can take a note about a book that I'm reading and say, like, I'm listening to this book as an audiobook, or I'm listening to this podcast. Like, give me a summary of this. Give me the top, Kindle, people will highlight their favorite passages. Give me a list of all the most cited or most highlighted pieces in this text. Could I go and just Google that? Could I Google, give me a summary of like this podcast? Yes, I could. But to me, after using a lot of these technologies, that seems like wasted effort. Like, yes, I could just go Google it and look across 3-4 sources, and I could figure out which one's the best and hodgepodge it together and pull it over. But now I have the ability to say, give me 500 words about this book. Give me a summary, and it will spit it out. There's a lot of positives and negatives to that, but that's one of the things I'm seeing is that as I take notes or as I research, in the past, if I had a research project that was I was doing some discourse analysis in the past, I'd email Raul and say, tell me everything you know about, so Raul is my chat GPT. And I say, tell me everything you know about discourse analysis. He say, hey, here's 3-4 papers where I did it. Here's a book I read. Awesome. And then I can use that in my own work. So what I've noticed is that for me, it's assisted my research pieces in different ways. Now, am I taking those summaries and putting them out there online? And no, I'm not. Like, I'm folding it into what I do and trying to connect the dots across. But it raises bigger questions, as Raul said, about like what we value in our classroom, what counts, because up to this point, if, one of the main currencies in our classroom is the ability to read and write, the ability to speak and listen, primarily in English, at least here in the classrooms where I teach. So one of the measurements that we do to figure out if you're like capable enough to like graduate from 10th to 11th grade or go to college or go get a job is interview, written statement, proficiency on tests, stuff like that, grades. And now you have a tool that is sort of like allowing some people to fake it till they make it. And so one of the things that we should be doing is saying, is it really a good benchmark for people's ability or lack thereof to be successful in learning environments or in college or career?
Sounds like it helps you with your journaling process, your gathering process.
And we've been using these tools and technologies for a while. I mean, we ignore the fact that algorithms have largely been guiding a lot of our research and our feeds for a while. If you watch YouTube a lot or Netflix or you're reading books, but algorithms have been for years, guiding us to what we want or they think that we want, and we sort of ignore that. But now, because it's a little bit more in our face with ChatGPT, that we're like, oh, this is totally different. No, it's not. This has been here for a while. It's just it's giving you more use of the tool. There are still a lot of negatives with that, and we could talk about that. But in a way, I mean, not in a way, this has been with us for a while. It's just a little bit more present in our lives.
Yeah.
I mean, even if you think about the writing thing, and I'm going to use an example here for my own work. Because I'm actually working on this on the book of video games. I bought myself a license for Grammarly, so I can use that when I do the final editing of all the chapters that my students are writing. And I use it, and I like the idea that it points out suggestions, and then sometimes it gives you a whole sentence. Every now and then, sure, I'll accept the suggestion. Sometimes I'm like, no, the way I write it sounds better for me, so I'm gonna keep it. But I still got, but we have been using this as these tools. I mean, Microsoft Word has spell checking, has spell checker and grammar checker.
Right.
It's like kind of like this. We have been having these little tools for a while, and we have these writing assistance tools.
Right.
Like even for transcription, now you don't have to transcribe. If I want to, I don't have to transcribe this. I can just get an app like Otter AI, and it does it for me. And sure, it's very possible that it's if I say Peggy Semingson, it's not going to transcribe Peggy Semingson. It's going to transcribe something else. And if I say Ian O'Byrne, it's not going to transcribe Ian O'Byrne. It's going to give me something else. And if I say my name, it's probably end up writing something that has nothing to do with my name. So I'm not saying it's fully accurate. I still have to go through this transcript because it's very accurate. I mean, those, for example, the transcription software is very accurate with everyday language. But when you start going into the specialized language, like names and references, it's very, it's not 100% accurate. So you still have to go and intervene. So the question is, how are we going to use this, for example, ChatGPT? And how are we going to use it in a way that we're not simply outsourcing or that the students are going to end up outsourcing the assignment to the AI? Or how are we going to find ways to weave it into the conversation?
Have y'all talked with your colleagues? Are you hearing ideas?
On my side, not yet. I mean, one of my colleagues posted, kind of brought up the question, and when I saw the question, and then I heard my sister-in-law talking about that, that's when I came back to the OAC and said we should talk about this, because I see this idea here. I saw someone talking to me here, like, hey, we haven't had a chat in a while, so why don't we just use this as an excuse to put the band back together? But
yes, totally. And on that note, anyone watching the recording, throw comments in the comment area, please.
But I mean, and yes, and I think that should we have the conversation about the ethical issues that are here? Yeah, because right now with some of the AI, and you think about the art AI, DALL-E, Midjourney, Stability AI, there are lawsuits.
That sort of.
I mean, the lawsuits are already popping up. Like for Midjourney and for Stability, they already got lawsuits coming. I know that Getty Images is suing one of those, so lawsuits are already coming. So the backlash is already happening. But the backlash is more, and then we have to think about, okay, where do we draw the line? Where would we draw the line between what is emulating and is actually stealing? And I think that's a conversation. I mean, that's a conversation we should have, because we talk about in classes about plagiarism, and we talk about copyright, and we talk about fair use. We just plug this into the conversation and expand it. I mean, because I think the ethical consequences of using this, like even the question that is happening, I mean, you've seen the news that there are already a couple of journals that have accepted ChatGPT as a co-author.
Wow.
So I saw the case that said somebody put ChatGPT as a co-author. Like,
I was just I had this piece that I've been reviewing for one of our journals that we both cohabitate, and in it, whoever the scholars are, they keep saying like, well, we did like, this quantitative analysis and machine learning. And I'm like, what does that mean? Like, I'm like, I know what machine learning is, but what does that look like in terms of data? Like, you just said, hey, deal with the data and do with it as you see fit. Like, you need to spell it out. I think that, one of the challenges here is it reminds me of like in baseball, there is discussion about like steroids and performance enhancing drugs. And so do you see a future where you have like some art or music or writing or creation or games or whatever that are computer generated, computer assisted? as opposed to, no, this is totally done by human hands and by the human mind. And do you know, there's a way to mark that. So you can get into digital signatures and certs and NFTs and all that stuff. But is there a way that you could say, hey, I bought this album by this new, because we're seeing machine learning, AI, GPT-3, whatever, music, you know, artists. And so is there a future where you'd have like, this is, you know, computer enhanced, machine enhanced, and this is just good old fashioned human, you know, synapses and blood, sweat, and tears?
Yes, I think so. And then the human thing may become the novelty, kind of like people listening to vinyl. It's like, wow, I don't know. I can see that. I can see that.
And you see where like the artists would have to build in like spots where you would know that that's really a human that did it. So if there's a recording, they call out, you know.
Synthesizer music from the 80s. We're 80s children. So,
yeah, I mean that's one of the things. Like, does it really? I mean, Raul brought up some of the challenges here. Like, yes, the ethical piece is a huge component. The what's happening with art and design right now is interesting to see what's happening. Another thing to keep in mind is that, you know, if you're going to engage with these tools, what are things to understand that a lot of the haters are going to say? One is the ethics. Another is, okay, well, this is taking away from these artists and stuff like that. Totally understand. We're starting to see, I had something in my feed about some law firm that was using like a GPT-3 or whatever to represent someone in court. And already lawyers are starting to file suit, you know, against that. Other things you need to think about. One is that with machine learning, it is machine learning. There's not like one way that the thing is learning and another way that it's not. So Chat GPT, GPT-3, they are learning, the machine is learning as you interact with it. Okay. So when you're trying to mess with the system or hack the system or ask simple questions and stuff like that, the machine is also learning. Okay. So then when new versions come out, it's going to say, hey, you all were asking about this before. We're going to make it easier for you. This is not new. My advisor back in the day used to say, you know, we would give a talk and say, you know, when people interact with a browser and they want to search for like, who is Britney Spears, they're so silly. They would type it in the address bar, the URL bar, and expect it to answer. Well, developers recognize the fact that human beings don't change their habits. So now you can go in your address bar of any browser, type in your query, and it's going to give you an answer. So one of the things is that it's learning from what you're doing now. So just be aware of that. If that weirds you out, that weirds you out. But as we said before, you've been doing this for decades,
right?
Or at least a decade. Yeah. The other thing to keep in mind is that it's learned and it's learning by a lot of information that we've had out there for a decade or two. It's learning by current interactions. And so all of the information that's out there, the corpus of information that's out there online, is learning from that. And so the challenge is, like, if you ask a question, you know, it's learning from stuff that might be misogynistic, it might be hateful, it might be racist, it might be bigoted, it might be. So one of the things to keep in mind is that as you're asking it questions, you might get some tainted information because human beings are flawed, you know, creatures. And so that's one of the things to keep in mind, is that you might get to some pretty raw, pretty, you know, deep places pretty quickly. It's almost like we need like a more informed way to deal with these tools, almost like a chat CRT.
Yeah. And then, so bias, to put it lightly, but worse, like sinister beliefs about other people. Just, that's been studied too, I know. And then I was listening on the same podcast from Harvard. They were talking about, I guess, whatever the equivalent is of the dark web, like cyber criminal type people leveraging these tools for whatever, you know, I don't know. I don't even know. Like, you know, so there's
But
that.
you see these wormholes, like all the QAnon stuff is some of the reason for the QAnon stuff is that people will go and Facebook or whatever algorithm will say, hey, we noticed that you believe in this conspiracy theory and that conspiracy theory and that conspiracy. Well, there's a conspiracy theory du jour that you would enjoy called QAnon. So they start giving you stuff to look at. And then you're like, hey, this seems good to me. Not me personally, more or less in-laws. But they basically look at it and say, okay, this is of interest to me. So that's one of the challenges here is that Will Fassbender and colleague at NCTE had a session where they were looking at GPT-3. This was before ChatGPT, 400 years ago. And they basically showed if a kid was sitting in like a middle grades or high school classroom, they started to write like biographical narratives about themselves. Say, hey, write my narrative, write for 15, 500 words. I grew up in this area. I had two parents. This will happen. After extending it a couple times, it got to some pretty dark places pretty quickly. And so you could see, it's like a choose your own adventure, but with like a botched information set.
Interesting. Yeah. I mean, I feel like I'm still learning, but I'm excited and open to what it might hold.
No, but I wanted to get back to something you were saying about because I mean, kind of like the return, and I was kind of thinking here something about the artisanal writing thing. I started thinking that is going to happen. Kind of like the value that when you started asking the question, I started thinking of the artisanal thing here and how that's going to start playing out.
Oh yeah.
Because kind of like one of the questions is how can we beat? And people are thinking in schools, how do we beat ChatGPT?
Right.
ChatGPT so students don't end up using.
And do you need to beat it?
Right.
Speaking of which, I had
Artisanal
Tech. I had a URL, Artisanal Tech. I think I need to get that URL back so we can get started.
Yeah, but the question is even not beating it or not. I mean, it's what are we doing? And because even if we start thinking about the nature of the assignments and the nature of the assessment, if we do that, they might not even go there. Because one of the questions is, the question is, what are we doing that we're driving our students there? Why are they gravitating to that for the quick fix? Can we do something about it? And I even mentioned that always thinking multimodal assignments are one way, because I mean that's going to force it to start going in multiple places. And sure, can they go and create a script with ChatGPT? Sure, but they cannot just simply turn in the script. They're going to have to do something with it. So even you can even weave that within a multimodal assignment. Yeah, sure, you can use it for the script, but now you're going to have to take the script and create your own video, because right now the AI hasn't gotten to the point that it can actually do the synesthetic part that we do, for example, when we put together videos. So the question is, how are we going to maximize the human factor when we're working with the students? How do we maximize the human factor? Because I mean, that's what it's going to boil down to, in the sense of it's not simply saying I'm going to go off the grid, because I mean, I don't say I'm not, and there will be people, there will be teachers who are probably going to start thinking right now, then we should go off the grid. Like, no, this is not about going off the grid. It's about how we rethink the classroom, how we really start rethinking schooling, in the sense of let's really turn the classroom into a place for creativity, where the tools can be part of this, but with not outsourcing, because it kind of goes down into the questions about data analysis. And I always say, jokingly, when I'm in a doctoral committee, that if a student begins with a sentence, I used Max QDA, I used NVivo, I'm like, okay, I always say, this is not going to end well, because I can see that you're not showing me your skills. You're just simply letting the machine run it for you. And these machines only run as far as your skills go. And that's the other thing we have to remind students. Yes, AI will only go as far as your skills go. If you're skilled enough to really create really complex prompts, ChatGPT is going to give you very complex text.
So how do people learn to do that?
Well, I think that we need to go back, and some part of that is actually going back to the foundational elements, and going back to, like, even, for example, what it means to write. And write as in this complex process of thinking, not the 5-paragraph essay that we should probably, now with ChatGPT, we should probably, I'm happy to sign the papers and bring the oil and give it the last rites. I mean, if you need me to give the 5-paragraph the last rites, I'm available.
Yeah.
I'm available for the last rites. I mean, I'm just saying it openly, because that particular format is not effective. And we had this conversation in language arts for several years already.
Yeah.
So right now the challenge is, how do we start thinking the writing process more creatively, in the sense of, what does it mean to learn to write? And what does it mean to write to learn? And what tools, what conceptual tools are we providing students from the base, from the early grades, so that they really learn to create their own effect? And then sure, and I can say at some point I might ask ChatGPT to give me a draft. Now, what am I going to do with that draft? Because when I was doing the exercise of multimodality, I'm like, yeah, this is still very baseline. I'd say from my knowledge of the field, from my knowledge of multimodality, I'm like, no, the answer you're giving me, it's the kind of answer that someone who just started learning about literacy or learning about multimodality would give me. This is not the answer that someone who's already done research in the area would give me. So I could take that and say, this is where you can begin. Now, let's take this and let's make it more complex, and you can build from that. So the question is, how? I mean, because as Ian was saying, I don't see this technology going anywhere.
Yeah.
But we learn how to use it to our advantage, or everybody's fears that we're going to be replaced by the AI, might come true. So that's a big challenge. But Ian, what
you got a decision to make as educators, as adults, youth, parents. We have a decision to make. When these advances come along, you either experience disruption or dislocation. So your life is disrupted, it has changed a little bit, but you can move on, or you're dislocated and you feel lost. We see this with, a good example is I had a family member that was having some issue with, the cable company or the water company or whatever. And another family member said, well, go on Twitter and leave a comment. Like, they're going to come back right away. And the response was like, oh, you don't need to do that anymore. Oh, not the Twitter. Like, oh, you need to call, or need to go there in person and write a sternly worded letter. So your life is disrupted a little bit, or you're dislocated. And so you, at this point, have the opportunity to try and work with these machines. Yes, I feel like we're in the Terminator or something. Work with them and try to figure out how to use it, and how, my thought is that we need to create human beings that can interact with these machines, with these technologies, and try and figure out how they can be useful in our lives, and how you can sort of, peacefully coexist. But part of this is we aim to re-examine what literacy means, what teaching and learning means, what assessment means, what education means. This is something we should have done decades ago. But this is just another version of the same story.
Yeah.
What is this, old wine, new bottles?
Yeah. And we've been interacting with machines, not in the same way, not so, connected, but, speak and spell. I mean, calculators, like, we've been using machines to enhance our learning as an extension of our brains, or to teach us things, simple things.
Well, my old boss would say, like, I don't have a pencil here, so this is a pencil for those of you. I mean, this is a technology.
Yeah, it is.
Your book, the printed book is a technology. Like, now we have the ability to jump on a Zoom call. This is the technology. We can use our devices. This is the technology. It is, impacting positively and negatively our ability to get work done and think and interact and communicate and participate with others.
Yeah, good point. Been doing it a while.
So last question I'll have for you two. Two questions. First, in the future, So I'm going to see my middle grade secondary teachers today in an hour or two. So in their future classrooms, they're going to have students write 5-paragraph essays. Okay. Surprise, surprise. So in a couple of years, they'll be writing 5-paragraph essays. What should they teach their learners, their students, so that they can sort of, what's the tell to show that it was a human being that helped make that 5-paragraph essay and not just ChatGPT? Like 5 years down the road, what does it look like? What is a tell or a sign that this was a 5-paragraph essay was written by a human?
Voice, but I don't know that machines can't do that down the road.
They can already do that now.
Yeah, voice and style, yep, mimicking. I don't know.
That's true.
I don't know.
Well, somebody's probably going to tell you, well, they can actually do handwritten.
Yeah.
But I don't think, yeah, I mean, and even that could be a start. I mean, because even in the process of writing, and I think the more we have been using computers and technology even for writing, the more we have begun to we have really returned to the value of the airplane mode, so to speak, of the offline and the off the grid moments. So it would be, so you can even say in the sense of show me the off the grid moments. And you can say, sure, you can have a moment where the drafting process, you can do it off the grid, and then you can
show me your graphic organizer, your brainstorming.
Yeah. I mean, show me. I mean, kind of like the sense of show me how you got there, because I think that because just showing me the text, it's kind of like, again, I was going to the example of the data analysis. You can show me what the software did. You can show me what the AI did, but one of the things I can show you, I can tell you is, once you have the training about the craft, you can tell the difference. We can tell them, teachers can tell the difference. We can tell the difference when it's AI generated or when you intervene. Same goes with the data analysis. I can see when you took the time to really think through the categories and think through the data, and then you went to the software, as opposed to when you just went straight to the software and didn't do the previous steps. I can read the paper, and I can tell you, yeah, the software assisted you, or the software replaced you, or you outsourced it to this. I can see the difference between the assistance and outsourcing. I can see that. The question is, how do we do the reverse engineering, so to speak, and we take that back to the classroom, and we show students, okay, this is how I can tell the difference. Boom. Take it back. I mean, kind of like use your expertise. And I always tell when I work in teacher education classes, I tell them, listen, you are experts of your subject, of your craft. There's a lot of stuff your students don't need you for, and your students can fact check you. And I kind of recall when I did my dissertation, I had teachers saying that they had students at the time, we're talking about 2009, and they had for the early generation, BlackBerries and all that, smartphones, and they said they would go under the table and they would go on Google to start fact checking what I was saying. So, and again, it's 2009.
Yeah.
And now it's even like, yeah, I know my students don't need me for certain things. They need me for the bigger picture stuff, for the bigger picture stuff, and for the minutiae of this. This is what they need me for. They don't need me for that. They don't need me to punch in the prompt. So they know how to punch in a prompt. They need me to tell them, listen, this is what a well-made prompt looks like, and this is how you get there.
Yeah.
These are the steps. So kind of like we're gonna have to really go back and get more foundational, because one of the things I think we're faltering at is the foundational elements. And I'm talking about even in terms of preparing our students for those challenges. So even the question I have to go is, how do I prepare my teachers for this new world? How do I prepare my teachers to embrace the fact that, maybe my students don't need me for the final step of the process, but in order for them to maximize the possibilities of using that AI, they need all these foundational elements. And that's what I can provide. I can provide the notion of what it means to create an outline, because at some point you might not just be able to give a prompt, you might there could be a stage where
Mhm.
this chat GPT could become, oh, they can give you a template for an outline. And kind of goes back into this idea of templates, because kind of we talk about how this has templates, but we also have templates for a lot of things. I mean, for letters, for reference letters, we just work with templates.
That's true.
So we have been using templates forever. So why are we shocked that now there is an AI that basically works on templates? That's what we do. We've been doing a little copy paste. It goes back to the question of how do we, and because the challenge right now is, okay, how are we going to get more creative? So
well, 20 years ago, you know, when I had students in my classroom, my middle grade classroom that were, you know, students with special needs or second language learners or just needed more support and modifications, I'd give them a Word doc with hidden text. And the template was baked in. I said, hey, there's a secret button on here, the show all, hide all. You can see my template. But it sounds like what you're getting at is really something simple and something that we've been arguing for years. It's focusing more on process instead of product.
Yeah.
Focusing more on like the path to get there and not just that ultimate thing that you turn in.
I totally agree. I have to head out in a minute.
Yeah, but yeah, I don't know.
So much to say and think. And then I thought about teacher as Sherpa, which I have not been able to find citations on that. And I know I heard it somewhere and I've been thinking about it for 10 years.
Well, it's apprenticeship.
Yeah.
You know, what is our real job? And, you know, it has me thinking more as Raul was talking, like, what is my job? A lot of my job right now is helping my students deal with toxic positivity and stress and trauma. You know, part of it is helping them think through, you know, diversity, equity, racism, inclusion, think through their profession. You know, I teach teachers, so it's thinking about what's the profession look like, and okay, what things did I do in my classroom? Did I get right and wrong, and how might I guide them? The actual content, you know, some of my students were saying last night, hey, the content for my English class or my social studies test, you know, my praxis test, you don't really teach us that. So why are we here? I was like, well, let me list the ways, you know, but you know, we don't teach you that, and we can't teach you that. That should have been gained elsewhere. So yeah, I mean, there's still a lot of questions that remain.
Yeah, I mean,
and hopefully people create space to think critically about those questions. But at the end of the day, you'll have a lot of people that have like a techno panic, just a knee-jerk reaction to anything that's new or anything that's different, or complicated.
Yeah, right. Catching people off guard to boot. But yeah, so staying aware. Well, good. Let's talk again. I'll hit stop if you're watching us. Leave comments.
Thank you.